Welcome back to the Transformers, the creation of a billion-dollar brand. In the last episode, we were discussing the evolution of the episodes. And the first season established the familiar story arcs in terms of the Cold War themes that came straight out of Bob Budiansky in the comic book, and also the interaction of the robots with the human being Sparkplug, Spike, and the handicapped friend of Spike, Chip. But in the second season, we would have a more matured, fleshed out storyline for the cartoon episodes, and where you would have more of not only sci-fi topics, but the topics that relate to more of that trend stacking that I was talking about in the earlier episodes, or at least of the web series that I'm doing here on the Transformers, and their unique path and creation of a billion-dollar brand. But starting with season 2, you would also have the influence of Flint Dille and as the supervising producer, he would bring on a group of writers who would make the various episodes accessible to the adults and the teenagers, more importantly, who were sitting there and just may have happened to be watching these cartoon series along with children 5 and over. And with this, you would have, particularly in season 2, you would have an episode written by Donald F. Glut, wherein Spike gets hurt in one of the battles between the Decepticons and the Autobots. And the Autobots transfer his body into a robot form, at least his consciousness into a robot form. And this creates no end of problems because Spike degenerates psychologically to the point where he is easily manipulated by Megatron. But this episode, Autobot Spike, which premiered September 23rd of 1985, would lead to the maturing of the whole Transformers series into something that was more than just your average child or kid fare, or just something more than a 25-minute commercial to sell toy line. And these are the episodes I just highlighted. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. This episode was one of those episodes that started to draw in older people, because that was a very sophisticated episode. Another episode was Traitor. And what is highlighted in this episode was written by George Hampton and Mike Moore. This episode, Traitor, which premiered September 27th of 1985, dealt with the ways in which the Autobots in particular were becoming susceptible to human nature. Whereas on Cybertron, they had very one-dimensional relationships. But here on Earth, the theme of the Autobots not only rebelling against each other and even against Optimus Prime's command. Now that was something that human nature does. So now the robots, whereas in the first season it was more of human beings being influenced by the robots or the contact with the Transformers, here in season 2 you have a dynamic where human nature is starting to overtake the AI technology, and as a consequence of that, the Autobots, more so than the Decepticons, start to suffer from being always in the proximity of the human being and on Earth. And you have one of the Autobots, not Ironhide. You have one of the Autobots who is Brawn, who is, and no, Cliffjumper. It's not Brawn. Brawn would do this in another episode. Cliffjumper, who becomes suspicious of Mirage. And then this theme of betrayal would go on in the Master Builders. Because in the Master Builders, you have some Autobots not telling Optimus. Optimus Prime gave one of the Autobots a command that Hoist, that he was not to build a tower that would collect solar energy and produce energon, because the Autobots did not know how to defend such a thing. Well, he did not. He listened to Optimus Prime's command and totally betrayed that command, was disobedient towards that, and a human being style made an alliance with the Constructicons to build this tower. And as Optimus Prime feared, it was used for the Decepticons, took it over, and Hoist, as well as the other Autobot who assisted him in this act of insubordination, were taken prisoner by the Decepticons, and that turned into a battle. But the point is that you would have this interesting thread and dynamic that was teased out of the story arc, where the Autobots would not necessarily follow the direction of Optimus Prime, and indeed would hide things from Optimus Prime as well. One of these episodes that really illustrated that was the Golden Lagoon, which was a favorite of mine. Where you had an Autobot named Beachcomber who found this golden lagoon of electron, which rendered the metal of a robot virtually invulnerable. And to return to a Cold War theme, Beachcomber kept the whereabouts of this lagoon from Optimus Prime because he was afraid that the Autobots would disturb the natural ecosystem around that lagoon. Well, to Beachcomber's surprise, the Decepticons discovered it, and as the episode progressed, this led to a war, and very interestingly enough, the Decepticons would, this is a spoiler alert, would destroy the lagoon, and the battle that both the Autobots and the Decepticons would have would confirm Beachcomber's worst fears, and in the end, there's this poignant scene of Beachcomber sitting there with all of the natural ecosystem around that lagoon having been destroyed because of the battle that took place there. And he said, "We won." But this is, particularly even today, that was an episode that showed the ravages of war, no matter how virtuous the war was. That war, whether for a good cause or a bad one, destroys. It doesn't matter. And that episode was written by Dennis Marks. And premiered in November of that year, November 4th of 85. And, these were very good episodes in terms of children sitting there looking at these episodes. Another, even though this is a fan favorite, and not necessarily having to do with the various high-level engagement that Flick Dilley would bring, the edgier episodes. One where the human beings would build a robot, a ninja robot, and the Decepticons would reprogram her. Let's see, enter the Nightbird. Would reprogram her to become a Decepticon in her action and programming. And that was written by Richard Milton. And Sylvia Wilson. But nevertheless, these kinds of episodes really drew in the adults, I'd say more so the teenagers, and the children too. I can remember very vividly, you never wanted to miss when these episodes, because like I said, in the last episode, they premiered during the week, and I will never forget, when I was in school, my mother couldn't pick me up all the time because she was a career woman, she was working, and I would miss these episodes. I would have to see them in a rerun, but nevertheless, I will never forget one time being in school, and one of the classrooms had TV, and for some reason they had the TV on, and I was in kindergarten that time, and my kindergarten teacher, or whoever, this is after school, had us sitting in this room, and the opening credits of the Transformers cartoon came on, and I said, "Oh, the Transformers is on, wow," and I was getting ready to sit and see what episode it was going to be, and this terrible teacher who had cheddar cheese arms and a beer gut turned off the television before I could even see the episode. And just to be mean-spirited, I'll never forget that. And there was nothing I could do because by that time I was already a troublemaker standing out in the hallway for my tenure in terms of kindergarten. But had that kind of experience of always being in trouble and carrying on. So, there was nothing I could do. But, that's how powerful, or at least the draw, the reach that this cartoon series would have for children. And when we come back, we're going to go into more of these episodes that I have highlighted so that people can get a flavor of the high caliber of writing that took place.